The phrase cultural appropriation is not an uncommon one to see in the news, usually in conjunction with a celebrity or a movie. On one hand, it's used to criticize Westerners who use other cultures for their own personal gain, and on the other, it's dismissed as a political buzzword to get clicks with those obsessed with political correctness. In each case, you hear arguments that sound so logical that in the end, you have no idea what to believe. That's why we're going to unpack the definitions of cultural appropriation, keywords, and ideas associated with it, and then provide examples of how aspects of Asian cultures, specifically the Japanese kimono and the henna body art, have been appropriated in Western countries and why people are angry about it. For the past few decades, there has been a wider dissemination of culture and cultural products worldwide. Due to globalization refers to the increasingly rapid and intensified circulation of finance, commodities, people, signs, and symbols on a global scale. Facilitated by technology, it intensifies global social interrelatedness, whereby space and time are compressed and previously separated locations are brought into a new proximity. This has led to processes like localization, where an activity or product is tailored to fit better with the local environment, making the foreign product seem more familiar. By moving towards a global culture and a borderless world, globalization promises a diverse, cosmopolitan globe, but at the same time promotes cultural homogenization. For example, Western markets have penetrated into the cultures of the global South, with Western brands such as McDonald's and Tommy Hilfiger being given greater value over local products, even if they are of the same quality. This intrusion of cultural homogeneity has given rise to fears of westernization and the erosion of their culture, especially after many of these nations in the last century have experienced the devastating effects of colonization. So this mixing and introduction of different cultures complicates the negotiation of who owns certain aspects of culture, who can authentically and ethically use them, and the effect globalization has on local tradition. This is where cultural appropriation comes in. Cultural appropriation can be defined as the taking from a culture that is not one's own of intellectual property, cultural expressions, history, and way of knowledge, and profiting at the expense of the people of that culture. Furthermore, when a dominant culture adapts elements from a marginalized culture and uses it outside the original culture's context, often without credit or against the wishes of the said culture. By taking something special from a specific culture without permission, it gives it global exposure and popularity, but at the cost of the cultural authenticity and rightful ownership, as it becomes normalized to the point it is robbed of its significance. In many cases, when a cultural product is used as a commodity for entertainment and amusement, they often blur the distinction between cultures and promote mostly stereotypical representations of a nation. The dominant power, usually the West, makes a profit at the expense of the smaller power, and by promoting cultural homogenization, the importance and heritage of the culture is also diminished. In every case labelled cultural appropriation, the important thing is to be aware of the context and circumstances of the parties involved, as well as the power imbalances. It can be said that globalization diversifies our world by discovering the value of cultural niches and regional assets. However, this discovery has led to the commercialization and appropriation of such culture to the Western gaze. Cultural appropriation can be defined as recognizable elements of a culture that are heavily lifted, often without any research or interest in that culture, largely for economic gain, and usually at the expense of the people from which it was taken. An integral industry that participates in cultural appropriation is the fashion industry. Fashion is considered an element of cultural identity. This is to say that clothing is an important fragment to the development and visual representation of a nation's history, culture, religion, and societal values. The West, with its history of colonization, occupation, and globalization, has allowed for its capitalist society to develop and incorporate elements of these cultures visually to accommodate for growing consumerism and the exotic and oriental gaze. A prime example of the appropriation of a culture's traditional garment is the appropriation of the kimono, Japanese dress robes. This traditional dress has been popular in the West since the 19th century and is in constant cycle of being altered, reformed, localized to common Western fashion tropes. Perfect examples of this reform and appropriation of the kimono include Madonna's Nothing Really Matters red kimono, Katy Perry's geisha-inspired performance at the AMAs, and the explosive kimono jacket trend in the 2010s. Before the analysis of these westernized examples, here is a brief description of the traditional kimono from Japan. The kimono consists of many parts: the juben, the undergarment, the kimono, the overgarment, which include many patterns made from wool, silk, cotton, and linen, the koshihimo, a belt to keep the kimono in place, the datajime, a belt over the kimono, the obi, a patterned sash over the datajime, the obijime, the thin belt over the obi, tabi, socks that have a groove between the big and second toe, in which accommodate for the geta or zori sandal-like footwear. In addition to the parts of a kimono, there are many rules in which to wear this garment. The juben and kimono need to be folded with the left side over the top and hair to be pulled away from the face and neck in an updo to show the collar. There are also many different types of kimono which are worn on different occasions. It can be seen that the kimono is an intricate garment which requires thorough research before wear. Madonna's kimono from the Nothing Really Matters performance is quite westernized. The sleeves of the kimono are quite exaggerated and much longer than the traditional kimono. There is the addition of a tailpiece, which is not part of the traditional kimono. It is also a knee-length garment, while kimono is ankle-length. Madonna's hair is also worn down, geisha-inspired makeup with a white face, bright eyeshadow, and lipstick. She is also wearing high-heeled boots, which is not the traditional footwear, and her kimono is folded with the right side over the top. Katy Perry's AMA performance brought shock to the world due to the inaccurate presentation of the kimono. She also has a geisha-inspired makeup with a white face and bright red lips, yet has also used Western makeup techniques. The garment itself is sexualized, showing the chest, while the kimono is a modest dress. The garment is also a mix between the kipao on the top half, a traditional Chinese dress, and the kimono on the bottom half. The pattern is quite a vague oriental floral pattern and also has overly exaggerated sleeves. The hairstyle she has is also inaccurate of a geisha's traditional hairstyle. The kimono jacket of the 2010s is quite the misrepresentation and misinformation of a kimono. This style is actually a haori, a jacket in which to wear over a kimono, typically worn by men. This jacket is also made of a chiffon fabric, a Western fabric not associated with the traditional kimono. This jacket also consists of many patterns of Oriental, Western, Persian, and Buddhist Indian art, and animal prints which are not typically seen on a traditional kimono and haori. Thus, it can be seen that Western designers have not put thorough care or research into the design of these loosely named kimono. Designers have taken certain elements of this garment and have reformed it to the Western gaze. The cultural appropriation and globalization of the kimono is quite vast in Western society, which maintains this ideology of Orientalism. According to Jaja Grays, Associate Professor at the University of New York, cultural appropriation refers to a privileged culture borrowing or stealing from a marginalized culture and strips elements of the culture to use it as a prop or for profit. This understanding can be used in the analysis of henna body art. It has been appropriated in Western culture. Henna, whose other name is Lawsonia inerimus, contains a pigment and other compounds which are a natural and friendly source of colour for hands, feet, finger, nails, and hair. It is also helpful in healthcare, as it is effective in reducing the chances of decubitus ulcers, and is used for wound healing, antioxidant, and antimicrobial activities. To understand the reason why henna is used so much in medical care and cosmetology, the origin and composition of henna must be examined. Henna was originated in the Mediterranean, Nubia, Libya, Tunisia, Arabia, Assyria, Mesopotamia, Persia, and India for over 9,000 years for the use of beauty and health. Currently, Henna is part of the culture for wedding and other kinds of celebrations in India, South Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Henna was, and is still, used for weddings or other significant celebrations for various nationalities and in many religions including Islam and Hinduism. Henna represents good health and prosperity in marriage. The creation process of henna is almost the same in the three henna cultures, which use henna leaves as the base, crushing it into powder and mixing it with liquid to create a smooth paste. However, in the West, a beauty studio created a video called Henna Hacks that caused controversy. Even the title caused a disagreement as it goes against the traditional use of henna using this simple method. So it's been asked, why do they need hacks? The most simplified and unauthentic hack in the video was that the white henna was made with body paint, safe PVA glue and glitter to make it shine. This method is surely a demonstration of globalization, westernization, and appropriation of henna, as it uses chemicals rather than the traditional and natural ingredients of henna. Furthermore, there is cultural significance in the shade of henna, as the darker the henna is, the deeper the relationship between the two individuals. However, as shown within the video, the West has appropriated and disregarded this sacred symbolism with their creation of white henna. Thus, henna is an easily accessible plant product which results in the highly consumed use. In the West, henna is mostly used for arts and aesthetics activities rather than medical, cultural, and religious practices. It is also used for the purpose of fashion, using printed henna patterns such as the mandala and/or using henna paste on cloth. This seems to be normal, yet the actual henna outfit was the meticulous focus on the fabric line and sewing details to create a henna symbol. Ultimately, the most important things we hope you understand from this is that cultural appropriation is a real threat to local culture, an unfortunate side of effective globalization, and it's all about the power balance between the cultures involved. Here we have given two examples. Firstly, of the Japanese kimono, a beautiful traditional dress which has been taken or appropriated by celebrities and the fashion industry. And also the henna body paint, which has been used in cultural events in many countries on the Asian continent for centuries. They have taken a cultural product of a nation that is considered lesser because of its exotism in the West, picking and choosing which aspects of the tradition they will use in their performances without honouring the cultural significance of it. While there are many nuances and arguments within specific cases, this is evidence of how we understand cultural appropriation, by taking something special from a specific culture without permission. It gives it global exposure and popularity, but at the cost of cultural authenticity and rightful ownership, as it becomes normalized to the point it's robbed of its significance. We mostly used examples of how Western nations, mostly America, have appropriated culture from Asia, as the West is indisputably the most powerful leader and propagator of globalization in the world, economically, racially, and culturally. However, cultural appropriation doesn't just happen between white people and Asian people, or white people and black people. It happens between different cultures within a nation as well. Within Australia, we have the Indigenous First Nations peoples, with a rich cultural heritage that has been oppressed for centuries. Yet their culture is continuously appropriated, especially as Indigenous symbols and art and expression of Indigenous belonging and connection to country are mass-produced, competing with legitimately produced and licensed Indigenous products, taking away opportunities for Indigenous people to commercialise their culture in their own ways or take credit for their own culture. In Japan as well, one of our victims of cultural appropriation has minority ethnicities, such as the indigenous Ainu and Rikuyu people, whose cultures are often appropriated within Japan. The negotiation of cultures, ownership, cultural preservation, and race is a complex one. But in order to not disrespect others, whether it's cultures overseas or within your own nation, being able to recognize the power balances and the effect your appropriation of a culture may have on others will go a long way in your travels and engagement with other cultures.